the worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach, and fitness expert, Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disruptive: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance. This is your chance where I sit down with today's top experts in business, mindset, wellness, and success to help you master disruption and thrive.
Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
With over 15 years in healthcare and a personal victory over alcohol addiction, he created Or Health. This is where healing begins and barriers end. He explores powerful medication-assisted treatments like naltrexone, delivered through telemedicine. Let's navigate the waters of recovery with expertise and empathy. Are you ready to dive in? Welcome to the podcast, Jonathan Hunt Glassman.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
It's such a pleasure to finally meet you. I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is how can we start with small wins to build momentum towards a big goal?
This is a strategy I literally use every day in my workday, which is when you sit down and the to-do list seems unconquerable, start with 2 or 3 that you know you can knock out of the park. Even a simple email. Prove to yourself that you can do it, and before you know it, you'll be ready to take on that big, hairy task. At Or Health, we see the same principle among our members in a much more profound way. We serve people who are trying to drink less or quit because alcohol is having negative consequences in their life. And that is the essence of a hard problem to solve. But what so many people find is that the best thing to do is the simplest, meaningful step. That might be starting on a new medication that they can take daily. It might be as simple as dedicating 1 hour to an activity that doesn't involve alcohol. And if they can just do that day after day, after a few months, it adds up to truly profound change in their lives.
Well, the reason I love that question is there's so much to unpack in this in so many different ways. Obviously, for me, I'm like doing so many things. I had to Pomodoro myself to get something done today. So it really helps me with productivity. And then with alcohol addiction, it's so interesting when you start with small wins. So you're saying that some people, you just help them drink less and it's not all or nothing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, the majority of our members, and we've served over 25,000 at this point, have the goal of moderation rather than lifelong abstinence. Now, that's not to say that sobriety is a bad goal. It's a terrific goal. And I think, to be honest, the safest and healthiest amount of alcohol for any of us to consume is 0. But our view is that insisting on abstinence as the only legitimate goal can be a barrier to people seeking treatment or staying with treatment, and therefore be self-defeating. So we're very supportive of people who are looking to cut back. And because the harms from alcohol tend to be pretty linear with the amount consumed, any step in the right direction is likely to yield real physical and mental health benefits.
I love the realistic approach that you have because I've never heard this before. It's so completely new. I mean, it seems like people go through all these steps and they try to do all or nothing. And I'm a big believer in moderation, especially when it comes to drinking, because I feel like sometimes you're just find yourself in social situations and the holidays or whatever. And it's easier for me to just have the discipline to drink less. So I love that approach.
Totally. I think you hit the nail on the head by referring to all or nothing thinking. In a lot of ways, that's the way we've thought about alcohol use in our culture for a long time. There are people we call alcoholics and people who have no problem at all with alcohol. Well, that's not really realistic. There are a lot of us in the middle who could do better by
Yes.
drinking less and may or may not identify with the goal of alcoholic. Rock bottom is another all or nothing concept. Sometimes we have this vision that we get worse and worse and worse, and then we hit rock bottom, and then we get better and better and better. Change usually isn't that simple, and you don't need to wait for rock bottom. It might be hard to identify.
I love that because the same thing would work in weight loss or health or anything really. It's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And everyone here is waiting till like January 1st. It's the holidays now. I'm going to just eat whatever I want and drink whatever I want. And then I start January 1st, and those people last about 6 weeks, right?
Totally, totally. The best day to get started, is today. And I think the analogy to other sorts of health and wellness goals or challenges is a good one. One of the doctors we work with is a primary care physician. So he sees people with all sorts of chronic health challenges, not just substance misuse. And, what he's said is, would we wait for someone to have a heart attack before we get them started on medication and behavior change? Of course not. But too often that's been the way we've thought about addiction.
I love your approach. It's so refreshingly different. And I love the way you start with small steps, like maybe you just exercise for an hour and make appointments with people where you go for a walk instead of go to the bar, right? Small steps.
Absolutely. And I think bringing that kind of social element into it is one that people find very helpful too. Some of the best steps can be joining a group that you have something in common with, a service organization, a park cleanup, a sports team, a hobby that maybe has fallen to the back burner when you've been drinking too much. And then you just get so many, it's not direct, that's not directly related to drinking less, but it has so many benefits. It's activating natural and healthy reward pathways. At the same time, you're saying no to alcohol. You're saying yes to these other good things in life.
Yeah, I love the focus on healthier habits. And even when things are tough, how can we look for the positive exceptions and use them as a guide to more of like what you need more of?
Yeah, it's something I have learned in my own life and encourage folks whenever they're dealing with a challenge. It works in the realm of alcohol misuse in that even folks who are really struggling can often identify one or two times over the past weeks or months when drinking really wasn't a problem, and then can examine, who was I with? What did I do beforehand? Where was I? What was different? What was I thinking? And are there ways to bring those circumstances into being more frequently? I think this is also one of the best pieces of career advice that any of us can keep in mind is when you're feeling stuck in a role or a job or at a company, it may be unrealistic to turn it 180 degrees in your next role. But is there a 20% of your current job that makes you really energized, where you feel like you're in a state of flow or in the zone in some way? And is there a job out there where you could be doing that 20%, 80% of the time? Those sorts of positive exceptions can be great guides to the future.
I love that way of thinking for people that are dissatisfied. There's so many people that are disengaged in the workforce right now that are silently thinking of quitting, and they're just looking at jobs while they're at work. And I think when you as an employer can try to get people in their zone of genius where you find like maybe you're interested in them and you want to know what really lights you up about this job, and give people an opportunity to do that 80% where they're 100% into it instead of just passing the time.
That is a great point. I haven't thought about it from that angle, but I'm going to take that tip from this conversation and start asking my team that question.
I think it's really helpful in the workforce because what I see is there's so many people that are not happy at work, and they're basically, people don't ask them enough questions. I think when you can engage with people, you can find out, what do you like to do? What do you like about this job? And that's always a double-edged sword because you got to feel safe that you can say the real answer, because some people will be like, well, you're fired. And other people will be like, let's let you do more of the things that, so first you have to establish the workplace safety, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of the bosses I've wanted to work the hardest for were those that I felt cared about me as a professional and as a person. Of course, they also cared about what I could contribute to their organization. But I think that curiosity and that sense of psychological safety can make all of those things compatible with each other rather than competitive.
No, I love that approach. And I really do feel like everybody wants to work with somebody that cares about them. Of course, performance matters because you're there to perform, but you want to perform more when you're more engaged. And that way there's less quiet quitting. So I really love your focus on core values too. Let's jump into that. Where how do we return to core values to make a difficult decision?
No matter how much you look for the positive exceptions or try to build momentum, I think we all know we run into those impasses where we've written the pluses and minuses out and it hasn't clarified the picture. I think that's the time to take a walk, move away from the whiteboard, and really reflect on what core values of your own are relevant to the decision. This was something I faced in my career when I was trying to decide whether I wanted to start Or Health and help others get access to this medication that had helped me cut back on my drinking, or if I wanted to continue in my traditional successful career at a Fortune 100 company. And it was a
Yeah.
difficult decision because I loved the job I had and I saw the potential to build a new company. And ultimately, I went back to something that, I've believed in and that was instilled by my parents, teachers from a very young age, which is that we should strive to do well for ourselves by doing good for others. And once I kind of checked in with myself and said, yeah, that's what motivates me. That's what I want to look back on in 10 years or 30 years when I retire and say, I did. It kind of became obvious that I had a unique opportunity to help others through my experience, through both the professional and personal elements of my journey. And I kind of had to go start this company.
Well, that is a difficult decision though, because you have to walk through the fear of giving up the stability of the paycheck and the whole employee whatever benefits and as an entrepreneur myself, I understand that's not an easy decision and we all face difficult decisions. So do you want to dive a little deeper into other people? Like, let's say you got your pros and cons list. That is hilarious because we've all had them. And you want to have that talk or you want to make that decision. Do you just go exercise first? Like what's the first step?
I think there is something to be said for, yeah, kind of getting away from the paralysis by analysis. I think
Yeah.
another helpful psychological exercise that I benefited from in this recent difficult career decision was imagining the worst case scenario, especially for those of us who are risk averse by nature. One of my, really cherished mentors said, Jonathan, first, you got to stop thinking about this as like the world's greatest tragedy. You have an abundance of options, not a scarcity of them. Secondly, I want you to think about what would happen if you took this entrepreneurial risk and it flopped. Where would you be in 2 years? You could probably get right back into the job market you were in previously, have a pretty interesting and compelling story to tell with lots of lessons learned, and you're probably not going to go hungry. And so, I think in some ways that it can actually be liberating to kind of, especially if you're trying to take that leap in some way, doesn't have to be starting a company, is think about the worst case. And if you can live with it, it's not quite as scary.
Well, I love how you bring up for people that are risk averse, because I've always been told, got to take risks. And I guess naturally some people are just crazy. Like I've always been like that. And the same people that are making decisions with their actual brain instead of impulse.
I
So
think the key is knowing ourselves, right? And like through this process, there was a big part of me that wished I had that more risk-seeking kind of stereotypical entrepreneurial instincts, but it wasn't me. And I had to be true to myself. And doing that, acknowledging how I felt, actually made it easier to communicate with the people I was making this decision with and trying to go in on this company with, about what would make me comfortable doing so. You can only be an imposter for so long. And so I kind of had to tell the truth that I was aware of the risks. And so a lot of times, my team or investors will tell me, you don't sound like the stereotypical entrepreneur who says, we're going to conquer the world. Nothing can stop us. But that as much as in a dream scenario, I might like that to be me, it's not. And you got to come back to your authentic self.
Well, that's what who people can relate to is the real you. So I love the worst case scenario. That's wonderful. Do you have any final tips you want to leave our audience with on, we've all been disrupted. It's what you do with it now that matters. I started this podcast over 3 years ago during the pandemic, never thinking it would still be going on. So what is your last advice on being unstoppable for our audience?
In this time where we're all in this process of adapting to a new normal in the way we work, where we work, why we work, I think looking within and honing in on those 1, 2, or 3 things that are going to be most satisfying at work and in our life in relation to work is going to be the best guide. The good part about this disruption we've been through is that there are more options on all the dimensions of one's career. And so knowing what those top priorities for you are. Is it seeking risk? Is it stability? Is it working from home? Is it being with your peers? Because that's who you gather energy from, is going to allow you to direct yourself across that broad spectrum of work options that exist today.
Well, I love the focus on the silver linings of the pandemic because there's definitely so many. I love working remotely now, traveling and, being able to meet with people any part of the country or the world. So where can people find you?
Best place to find us is oarhealth.com, OAR health.com. In the About Us section, folks can read a little bit more about my journey. And then if they like, set up a time to chat one-on-one, just like we've been doing.
Wonderful. I love the advancement of telemedicine. Thanks for being a fantastic guest.
Thanks for having me.